Welcome to The Culture. We rest at the pulse of the community, providing all things news, music, fashion, events, and everything that we talk about in between. It's a lifestyle. We are The Culture. Welcome to The Culture. I'm Jessica Modkins, your host. Today, joining me, I have South Dade Branch NAACP President Dwight Bullard. Thank you so much, Dwight, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
And I also have Miami-Dade Branch President Ruben Roberts joining us. Thank you, Ruben, for coming back.
Thank you so very much for having me.
Now, I wanted to start our conversation off today by reading a tweet from Kamala Harris. And I'm certain that you probably have already read this, but I want to frame the context of our conversation for our viewers. So Senator Harris tweeted, "Too many Black men have been racially profiled by law enforcement for wearing masks." Senator Booker and I led a letter to Attorney General Barr today demanding bias training and guidance for all officers. Now, we know here in Miami, there was a doctor, Dr. Henderson, who was in South Dade, had his mask on as he should have, and was doing things that he deemed important to help homeless people, yet that man was arrested. And I want to start with you, Ruben. I know for a fact that you did a lot on social media about that injustice. Can you speak about it?
Yes, thank you. And not only on social media, I immediately called the chief of City of Miami Police and shared with him my disdain for the treatment of Dr. Henderson and shared with him that the community was outraged as well. And I work with several municipalities and their chiefs, and I try to create an opportunity for them to be sensitive to the interactions and treatment of Black folks. Simple, basic things that certain rights that we have in terms of being able to sleep in your home without having your door broken in and then you mutilated by bullets, or standing in front of a store, or just simply jogging in the case of Ahmaud. Seems to be things that challenge folks. The mask, when we use that term, is symbolic, but it's surreal too. I mean, for us, I worry about what happens after when things open back up and we're required to wear masks for a lot of young Black men. And I'm concerned about folks using the concept that they were protecting themselves. Protecting themselves from what? If I pose no threat, I don't have any, I'm not armed, I'm not attacking you or anything of that nature. So the mask, for those who want to enact some sort of violence, gives them gives them credence. It gives them the ability to enact violence. And the mask for us is symbolic in the sense that we're invisible, we're inhuman, we're not human, and you don't see us. And so when we talk about this mask, one of the things I think that we are doing now is really making sure that we're not only seen, but heard, and let folks know that we're going to be responding to these types of things in a manner where we're not going to let up. And that's what you saw in the case of Ahmaud, in the case of Dr. Anderson as well. You saw that. You saw how the community came together, and I love how the community is coming together to stand up for, and just take off that mask and say, "See us. We are human. We need to be treated with the basic humanity." When I've seen videos on YouTube where police officers apprehend, or not even apprehend, armed white people are in the police officer's face, the police officers don't even pull their weapons or anything of that nature. And when you have a situation where you have an unarmed Black man, he becomes that threat to you. So in the case of Dr. Anderson, someone who's doing so much good work in the community, testing the homeless, providing tents that were torn down for the homeless, doing this type of work on his own dime, and with the other organizers, Make the Homeless Smile, Valencia Gunder, and those, on his own dime. And you saw, the police saw a Black man. You didn't see a doctor. You didn't see a doctor. And that's where I think the biggest challenge is how when they see us, how they see us.
That reminds me of the Netflix show Black AF, where they discuss white gaze and peacocking. And I know that I've grown up in a family where appearance is everything. You get one chance to make an impression. You always put your best forward. People judge you, whether right or wrong. They judge you off of your appearance. And we know just in society, people are always looking at you and trying to determine who you are. But as a producer here for The Culture pointed out, he got into his car the other day and a neighbor asked him, was he going to rob a bank? He's a Black man, and he had his mask on, doing as he was supposed to and is instructed by law. It's just unfortunate. And I wanted to get your response to Dr. Henderson and just where we are as a society right now, and trying to allow a Black man to cast an appearance of being less threatening in America.
Well, I mean, to the earlier points that Ruben made, I'll just kind of piggyback and add on to that. The reality is that we have a country that was built on racist principles. Bottom line, like, it's embedded, whether it's the 3/5 Compromise, whether it's Jim Crow laws or Black codes that were created, whether it's, unfortunately, Supreme Court hearings, whether it be Dred Scott decision or Plessy versus Ferguson, where we have this interconnection of racism that's already embedded itself in our country. You add on to that this notion of dehumanization and what that means. So when you have a group of people, in this case, Black people, that have always been viewed as less than human, again, by custom, by law, by tradition, and now you add on that a pandemic, right? You're going to end up with these set of circumstances where now people who were already scared of you as a Black person are now even going to claim to be even more scared with you as a Black person with a mask, right? Kind of two things that come to mind. And I saw this yesterday, and I hate to be tongue in cheek, but it kind of struck me, especially about this conversation, where it was someone asked, why does Batman not wear a full mask? And it said that because he wants to show the world that he's still white, right? And so when you think about that kind of like notion, right, the idea that the presence of whiteness is disarming, gives somebody a sense of calm. You see police interaction with individuals, even on the steps of these state capitals where these folks are armed to the T with bulletproof vests and rifles. The idea that because they are inherently white allows them a certain freedom and privilege to exercise their Second Amendment right and their First Amendment right, in stark contrast to what we see happening with Black folks. And all of us know, and society knows that if you switch out race and put Black people in that scenario, that begins and ends differently. You're not going to have masses of Black people armed to the T storming the Michigan Capitol without some repercussions that come with that. And it's this notion that we are still fighting for whole existence in a country that we built, that we literally built. with our blood, sweat, and tears. And so, America still has to wrestle with that. The idea that racism is embedded in the American DNA, and that Black people in particular have bore the brunt of the brutality of that reality.
Mm-hmm. Good point. And where we are right now is not going anywhere. We're going to have to keep these masks on. And I believe we were already walking around with a mask, as you pointed out, Ruben, before we physically had to apply a mask on our face. What advice are you all championing for Black men, especially, to seem less threatening in America right now?
So that's the thing that really, that's the conundrum to me, because why do we have to take that extra effort to be less threatening, right? So we have to do it if we want to survive in some instances. But again, as a father, my son just turned 20 years old today. My greatest fear is me being able to protect my son or my family as a Black man. That's my greatest fear in this country, in the United States. I mean, if my son goes out and if he's identified as a suspect, he fits the description, if you will, and then if he is accosted by police and manhandled or whatever, I will be enraged and I will go out and I'll do what I can. But imagine Ahmaud's father, how he must feel, or the father's, Trayvon's father, or any other father who felt that they could not protect their child, from the abuse or the hardships or murder of someone just simply because of the race of his skin, the color of his skin. My thing is that we have to stand strong, but we have to be smart. We have to be smart at the same time. If you feel that the situation is going to escalate into something that results in deadly violence, then you need to fall back a little bit. But at the same time, like I tell my son, you always, if they don't de-escalate, you de-escalate, and then let me handle it. We need to have folks like the North and South State NAACP to be there for those folks who need someone to be in their corner when they are treated unfairly. And I've done that. Dwight has done that. I've done that on the beach when they just manhandled this young lady, Dwight and I, on the beach during spring break. We have to take that charge and speak up for those injustices that happens to our people. And then we need the community at large to be, outraged about that. So as long as we are silent, our silence gives consent. So the message is that you must maintain yourself to make sure that folks don't feel that they have a right to disrespect you or treat you inappropriately. But at the same time, if you see that it's escalating to something else, you do your best to keep yourself safe. Unfortunately, in the case of Ahmaud, there was nothing else he could do. By the time that young man came out of the car, the gun was already drawn. And they knew it. They knew it. When I was a kid, I remember the old guys on the street corner would tell the officers, "Listen, you take that damn gun and badge off, and then let's talk. Let's get with it." I think it empowers people when they feel that they have these weapons, because they know if they didn't have those weapons, the story would be different. You know what I mean? But we can't just go out there and react in a violent way, because we end up paying the price more so than those who are perpetrators of crime. We will end up we'll be criminalized, or we will be murdered. So just stand firm, but don't escalate, is what I would give in terms of advice.
Yeah, and I would go, with the initial question, what can we do to be less threatening? It's a catch-22, because just the mere fact that you are a Black male in this country, statistically is shown that you are threatening. Police officers, interestingly enough, have a saying when they call in for an assailant. And because they've used it so much, they've shortened it to standard. So whenever you hear an officer call another officer and say that we have somebody who's standard for them is a black male, white t-shirt, blue jeans. Standard. I want you to understand that. Like, it's no longer standard description or give them the full description. It is literally an officer to another officer saying standard, period. So that lets you know how deeply rooted the problem is when you have an entire institution like a police department that has become so comfortable with the criminalization of black males that they no longer need to express the fact that these folks are in fact male, black, or anything else. So I don't know what you do there. I mean, in the case of Trayvon Martin, for instance, I know a lot of folks are saying, well, they try to justify it like, he's wearing the hoodie and that's what made it dangerous. Fast forward to Ahmaud Arbery. Here's a man in broad daylight with a white t-shirt on, contrasting against his black skin. It doesn't get more apparent that you can see this human being. You can also see that he is not armed, that he is not dangerous, and yet still he ends up dead. In the case of Philando Castile, gets pulled over for a stop, admits, hey, I'm currently in possession of my firearm. I'm going to, and follows all the procedures and protocols. And again, ends up dead. In the case of Breonna Taylor and Tatiana Jefferson, sitting at home minding their business, In the case of Breonna, sleep in her own bed, In the case of Tatiana Jefferson, playing video games on the floor of her own house. You hear these stories continuously happen over and over and over again. That being said, one of the solutions I would drive home is go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. And what I mean by that is we have a number of organizations that are fighting for the rights of Black people, whether it's Miami-Dade NAACP, South Dade NAACP, Greek letter organizations, Urban League, whatever the case may be. These are organizations that are available, that are membership driven, that have opportunities for you as a Black person to openly express your disdain for where society is going, but then to operationalize those efforts and actually to change something, right? So, you as an individual going up to the mayor's office, or you as an individual going up to go see the chief of police, is amplified even greater when you're part of a long-standing organization that has tradition in doing that, has the backing and has the history to prove itself, more effective in kind of delivering that message. And so, what I would encourage folks to do, and not to say there has to be one of these historically long-standing organizations, whether it's murder, Mothers of Murdered Children, that has come on the scene as of recent, Trayvon Martin Foundation, that comes about after tragedy. All these organizations come to exist because they recognize that there's a problem and there's a problem that needs to be addressed. So I would encourage folks to make sure that you're a member, but an active member, in participating in trying to make real change in your community.
We had Sabrina on the show recently, and when I asked her the question about a call to action and where we would like for our culture to try to be in front of situations instead of being more reactive to situations, she echoed everything pretty much that you just said, except she just said you need to become a part of organizations like the NAACP and not go out and start your own, because there needs to be a platform in which your voice is heard, and it's heard in an organization like the NAACP from leaders like yourself. And even with that being said, as uncomfortable as the conversation is about trying to give off a less threatening appearance and trying to make other people feel more comfortable about your presence in the grocery store or just walking down the street or driving in your car, is still a harsh reality, and things that we discuss even with our children, and especially my son. Dwight, if you had a son, what would be some advice that you would try to instill upon him in living right now in this era?
Well, you know, I was a public school teacher for 17 years, so I had my fair share of young brothers, you know, come through my classroom. And I would really, you know, universally tell them um, to be the best authentic self that you can be. Right. At the end of the day, we always have to have these conversations about how should you look, how should you act, how should you be. And all of that then becomes moot when you hear these circumstances happen to people, you know, Black people of different ilks, whether it's the well-dressed brother or the brother in the t-shirt and sneakers. It has a universal thread. I think the thing that you know we have to do is to not be some sort of you know walking stereotype of what we perceive we need to be, but just be your authentic self, right? Become well versed, become well read, understand changes in the law, understand the law itself, so that you stand a fighting chance uh, when getting into these circumstances. I think too often, to paraphrase Cedric the Entertainer, you know, people operate under this wish notion versus that of hope, right? It's like, you know, we wish people would treat us a particular way, or we wish people would act a certain way, right? Yeah, right. But it's like be more diligent in kind of the open expressing of oneself, um, and being learned at the end of the day. Being, you know, knowledge is power. So that's what I will always instill in my students is that knowledge of self, knowledge of understanding, knowledge of the greater society is going to give you the best advantage possible. So gobble up as much of that as you can and avoid the pitfall.
Ruben, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I gotta say something about this.
Okay.
Look, Dwight and I are two imposing figures as Black men. And then Dwight has the standard beard going on right there. When you listen to Dwight and his eloquence in his speech, his oratory skills, when you know his resume, a senator, and you know what he's accomplished, all of that is not seen when he's walking down the street. What they see, big Black man with a beard. And whatever thoughts that are conjured up, see, I can't be responsible for the thoughts that you have about me and my people. I can't be responsible for that. And I think that that's what society wants us to be. And it is truly institutional racism. The assumption is you come from a single parent family. Dwight does not come from a single parent family. I don't come from a single parent family. The assumption is that you grew up in the projects. I never grew up in the projects, but the assumption is that this is all of Black people. And even if you did grow up under those circumstances, it does not relegate you or put you in a position where you are someone that is lawless or not fit for society. So what happens is, because of the systemic racism, because of the standard code that Dwight just mentioned or whatever, these assumptions are made when folks see you. And like I said, you know, when they see us, you know, if they see us. So what they see, when they see us, it's whatever is in their head. It's not what the reality is. And one of the things that we should not do is because this is one of the reasons why we suffer from anxiety. This is one of the reasons why we suffer with depression. It's one of the reasons why a lot of Black people self-medicate. when you feel like you can't even be a man in your own country because of the way that you're being treated. So one of the things, or woman, and so one of the things that we need to do is maintain our standard, make sure that we can be and see ourselves as human, as Dwight was sharing as well, but make sure that we are not holding ourselves responsible for how someone else views us. And the last thing I want to say is this. The thing that we need to do to make a change in this is to make sure we keep the pressure on for every person that's out there that wrongfully murders a young Black man, a young Black woman, that they're prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And any prosecutors or any police officers that try to cover it up, they need to be prosecuted as well. I think that when people know that they'll be penalized for doing such, then their attitudes would change. But they've been protected and not penalized, and so the behavior continues. And that's a part of that systemic racism that we're speaking of. Until the system prosecutes and treats those folks who does those injustices to us in the way that they should, they'll until that happens, they will continue. So we have to stay vigilant. We have to go out and make sure that we let the world know what's going on, and that we are fighting for it. There's a quote that was out there that says that they saw the video. That didn't change. It's when we saw the video is when it changed. Because when we saw the video, then we mobilized and we acted on what we saw. And so that's what we need more of. We need to put that pressure on. As a result of that, those two guys were arrested. Doesn't mean that they're going to be convicted, but at least that they were arrested. The process was started, and now we have to just do our due diligence to stay and keep the pressure on to make sure that the outcome will be what we would want it to be. It will not bring Ahmaud back, but we need to make sure that we make a statement with this.
I wanted to close with where you all are with the NAACP. I know you're running a campaign right now, #We're Done Dying. Can either of you speak about the premise of it and the call?
Go for it, Ruben.
So We're Done Dying is, again, symbolic. When we speak about we're done dying, it's that we're done being treated in the manner that we have been treated without really not taking any action. So we're done with the social injustice. We're done with these murders that are happening that are race-based. We're done with the economic and financial injustices. Our small businesses are not receiving their portion of the stimulus act. Why? Because the banks are going with those who are asking for larger sums of money, because the banks get paid based on the percentage of money that you're asking for. So what does that do? That leaves the small businesses out. So we're done with that. So when we see these injustices, when we see anything that's happening on those veins, then we're going to react and we're going to fight and we're going to make sure that our voices are heard. And so that's the symbolism of we're done dying. Doesn't mean that we're done with the physical act of death, because we don't have any control of that, but it's just simply those things that causes or makes us that creates problems for us. We're done with that. And that's the symbolic meaning of that slogan and that catchphrase.
Yeah, I mean, what Ruben stated is absolutely that, right? I mean, it's kind of a play on Fannie Lou Hamer's "We're sick and tired of being sick and tired," right? We're just, we're over this constant, berating and dehumanization and mistreatment of Black people, whether that's on the COVID response piece, whether that's on the economic recovery piece, whether that's being, passed over for the various things, or in the case of what we've been talking about, the unfortunate deaths of people at the hands of whether it be police or everyday citizens. We're done with it, and so we encourage members and non-members of the NAACP to get involved, use the hashtag, make it kind of part of your social media, your everyday. I think we're all a little bit more reliant on computer technology and the internet these days. So if you're already on social media, please engage with us. But would also encourage everyone again to join the NAACP and get involved in the fight. I always talk about how people have approached the NAACP in the past as this notion of being around. You've been around all this time. Well, what have you done? And so you have to ask yourself the question: for the steps ahead that we've made, or the strides that we've made in the last 100 years, understand that the NAACP has been there the whole time. Whether it's the Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, whether it's the election of Barack Obama, whether, however you want to view success in kind of moving the needle, the NAACP has been present in all those spaces with consistency. So where other organizations have come and gone, the NAACP has been around for this 111 years, and we encourage everyone to be a part of the continued history of the NAACP.
Thank you, Dwight. Thank you, Ruben. Thank you both for taking time out to sit and educate our viewers at The Culture. And before we leave, I want to make sure that everyone knows how to join the NAACP. You will go to naacp.org and click on the join button. You would then put in your zip code and select the branch of the NAACP that is closest to you. You live in South Dade, and you will join the South Dade NAACP chapter. And if you are in North Dade, you will join the Miami branch. Thank you both again for coming and sitting. I encourage everyone to follow The Culture on Twitter. All of our handles on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook are at The Culture XYZ. We look forward to seeing you all again, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Culture is produced and owned by Hip Rock Star Media and cannot be reproduced or broadcast without written consent by Jessica Garrett Modkins. All rights reserved 2020.